This is a GA4 Marketing Masterclass, GA4 Google Analytics 4. Now, you will know if you are looking after any of the analytics and measurements and analysis of your company or organization's website, you will know that Google Analytics, as we knew it, Universal Analytics, as it was called, is no longer. And we've all been forced to transition across to GA4, the next iteration of Google Analytics. So that's what we're going to look at in this particular session. This is not a tutorial, the how to do it, not a tutorial for taking you necessarily step by step through building lots of different reports and things like that. But what I'm going to do is very much focus on what this really means to us as marketers. So if you're a digital marketer, marketing exec, marketing manager, this is what it's going to impact you like. So this is kind of all the things, all the building blocks, all the various elements that are probably going to interest you the most. Okay, and I will leave you at the end with some links to go out and watch some specific tutorials for each of these steps that we're going to be talking about. But I'm going to focus on really what is in it for us marketers rather than necessarily go through the fine detail of which button to click to prepare each report. So what I thought would be interesting to do, first of all, is to kind of get a sense of actually what UA4, sort of GA4 rather, is rather than UA, Universal Analytics. So I thought, well, what better to ask than Google Bard? So Google's version of machine learning AI. I thought I'll go into Google Bard and ask the question, why should I as a marketer be interested in GA4? Because I thought, well, let's get first a word from Google Bard. So Google Bard said, well, my top tip for helping you to understand why as a marketer you should be interested in GA4 is to think about the future of marketing. GA4 is designed to be more future-proof than Universal Analytics. It offers a number of features that can help you improve your marketing campaigns. And then it goes on to just give some reasons for this. GA4 is more privacy-focused. Okay, it uses machine learning to fill the gaps in the data that isn't available due to privacy restrictions. So it means that you can still get valuable insights from your data, even if you're not able to collect all of the data you'd like. And I'll show you some of the places you can click on in GA4 to give you some really interesting insights that we couldn't get with the older version of Google Analytics. Second thing Google Bard said was that it's more cross-platform. So it can collect data from a variety of sources, including websites, apps, and even offline transactions if you set it up correctly. So this means you can get a more complete picture of your customers' behavior, regardless of how and where they interact with your brand. Now, for me as a marketer, thinking customer journey, and this is going to be something we're going to talk about a lot through this session, customer journey, it's really, really powerful. Universal Analytics, as we've grown up with, never really gave us a huge amount of detail. There was a visitor flow. You could kind of see where people were going sort of through your website step by step, but that was kind of it. GA4 gives us so much more. It's designed for marketers. Next thing that Google Bard told me was that GA4 is more predictive. So it can use machine learning, so AI, to predict future behavior. Now, I'm getting really interested at this point because we've always thought that Google Analytics was a kind of a report on what has happened, you know, the almost historic view of your website, how it's been, how, you know, people have used it, you know, how people have come from social and the pages they've clicked on, that kind of thing. But it hasn't really ever been able to help us to look into the future. And what GA4 allows us to do, according to Google Bard, is to identify trends and opportunities that you may not have seen before, which will help improve your marketing campaigns. So if you're interested in the future of marketing, then Google Bard says you should be interested in GA4. So those are the key things that it's really looking at here. It's privacy focused, so it gives you the right kind of data to know that you're compliant. It's cross-platform, so it gives us data pulled in from a variety of website-related sources, and it's more predictive. So in theory, it should be more useful to us. So what I'm going to do as we go through this session is give you some views on the places to look, the things to click on. This is not a step-by-step tutorial, though. As I said right at the start, I'm not going to take you through this is how you set things up, but I will leave in the comments below in the recording of this, in the description, I will leave some links for you to then follow up on if any of these particular things we're talking about are of particular interest. So, I'm assuming here that you have already created and set up your property so that you have a GA4 property that is now taking over from Universal Analytics. Now, the reason for clicking on this particular account, which we're going to use to demo in here as we go through this particular session, is because something interesting is going on. Across the top here, it says you need to complete setup. Now, even if you think you've completed the setup, and this was done originally back in October of last year. So this organization got in pretty early and they created their Google Analytics 4 account. And you can see it's been tracking information since last October. Here it is, October, look through to the present time. And you look at this and you think, hey, that's great. But then when you look at it, you can see here, it's stopped. Now, what has happened is, and I want this to be the very first thing that you do, is if you see the banner across the top of the screen here, Google has put in some additional bits and pieces in its transition through to GA4 that you might not be picking up. And in fact, this GA4 account stopped processing on the 1st of July. So this is the new account. This is GA4. It's all up to date, but it's stopped processing because this banner says there is some incomplete settings. So we need to go in and complete the setup. So if you see that, please do that. Don't ignore it. It is clear here that, on the 1st of July, when Google Analytics, Universal Analytics was switched off, this account has stopped tracking in its GA4 profile. Okay, so go in and complete the setup if you see that banner. Now, let's assume that you have seen that banner, you've gone and completed that activity. What you'll notice over here on the left-hand side is that things look a little different. What we used to see over here were things like, where have our visitors come from? Which pages? What is the kind of site usage? Now, all of that stuff's gone. Okay, so we're seeing 3 different areas. I'm not going to focus this time on advertising, but we're going to have a little look in here at reports and the explore feature, because if you're quite new to GA4, if you're new to Google Analytics, then what I don't want to do is bombard you with stuff that is going to confuse you and really going to put you off of where you might be looking to get some value from this. So I just want to keep this thing very, very top line, but guide you through some of the early values that you can get as a marketer. Okay, so let's go back to the home page here. Let's just click on home. Now, your first point that you're going to see, and this is where I instantly knew that we are not tracking data, is because this month, and you can see this is the last 7 days. But if we can see, obviously I can sort of have a little look in a minute at 28 days, but you can see over the last 7 days, so obviously including the first week and the second week of July, you can see that this Google Analytics is not actually currently tracking any data. So that's what then triggered me to think, oh, must go in and complete the setup. So I need to do that after this call. But if we go back and look at, say, the last 28 days, you can see, yes, look what's happened. Here it is. It's stopped tracking. And you can see it suddenly fell off a cliff and went to 0. So there's additional things we need to do. And that's why I said at the start, it's important that if you see anything reporting 0, you know that you haven't yet completed your tracking. But let's have a little look at the last 90 days just to check that we've got some data coming in here. And yes, we have. So for this particular website, we've seen 353 users. So that's visitors to the site. 350 of those, so pretty much everybody there has been a new visitor to this site. The number of events have been 2,000. Now, there's a keyword. So this is the first of our keywords that is very, very different to the old style of reporting in Google Analytics. This is our first word, event. So everything that happens on your website that you might wish to track is called an event. Okay, so this is a person arriving and landing on a page. That's an event. Somebody scrolling down the page. That's an event. Somebody maybe clicking on a particular button or link. That is an event. Where they go to on the next page is an event. So anything that happens is an event. Now, we've not had events before. Okay, so before it was all based around a particular location on the page. So it could have been a particular page, and it could have been a particular hotspot on that page, or it could be a particular button. It could be maybe a PDF file that you were looking to encourage people to download. These were all places on your website that you could get reports for. So you could see the number of people who come to a particular page, how long they stayed there. Now, that is not the current way now going forward that we're going to be looking at this. We're going to be looking at events. In other words, things that people do rather than places where they go. Now, I'll explain this when we come to actually creating a report in a minute. But the first thing to get your head around is that this is very different. So we're looking to create a series of events on our web pages that hopefully we can get people and encourage people to engage enough that they will actually perform the event that we want them to perform. So they'll do something, and that something is an event. So the nice thing here is initially, even though we haven't gone into any reports yet, we're literally just on this little home screen, and there's a few things that we can look at, and I'll show you these in a minute. What you'll see is that it is based around these events. So if you can start to think about, okay, what kind of events would I want to see on my website happening? Now, of course, if you've already plotted your customer journey, you already have a series of events, because those events will be locations and things and activities that you want your customer to experience. So if you plot out all of the things, plot out almost like a route map or a site journey for your particular customer. So this is your target, very specific target customer persona that you're looking to take through an experience on your website, then they will be experiencing a number of events. So plot those events out even before you start to look at Google Analytics, because if you know those things, you can then start to create some reports and explore how many people and who actually came through to experience those events. So do you see what's happening here? Already, Google Analytics is starting to align with the kind of things that marketers do. So rather than just say, hey, here's what's happened on your website, it's starting to think like us. So this is going to get more and more clever as the years go by. We're going to really see this really falling into the palm of our hand to give us every piece of data and analysis for us to evaluate that's really important to help us to do our job better. So it's all good news. But that's the very first thing that you will see is event. And then you'll see things like engagement, et cetera, but I'll come on to that in a little while just to show you some of the stuff that will be of interest. Now, because this particular site isn't reporting current data, I'm just going to go on to another page, another series of pages that's going to give us a little bit more sort of granular detail and show us a little bit more detail about the event engagement, because that's going to be important, because I'd want to know that if I'm looking at a particular web page, I'd want to know over a period of time, exactly what was happening in terms of engagement. So we'll have a little look at that. And then when you look on your web pages, you can then see specifically what kind of engagement you have. Okay, so we're looking here just at the home screen. You can see it's this little home button here over on the left. So if we just kind of go up, you can see at the moment there's a real-time reporting. So there's nobody been on this particular page or series of pages in the last 30 minutes. This page is actually, or this site is actually undergoing development right now. So the numbers are going to be very, very low because it hasn't actually been relaunched. So a lot of this is kind of test visits from various locations, but it'll give us enough data to kind of work with. So you can see we're still on the home page over here. So we haven't clicked down into any reports or anything fun yet. This is very high level dashboard stuff. but it's going to give us some of the kind of visits and users by country. So, that could be of interest, but it might not. We could also go and have a look over, say, last 90 days. So we can just toggle this down here, this little drop down arrow, to just give us a little bit more of a view as to where things are coming from. And we can do a deeper dive into countries, but I'll do that in just a minute when we go a little bit deeper into some of the things that you can see, because there's a lot of really, really exciting new stuff in here that goes beyond some of this, which is going to look quite familiar to you if you've used Google Analytics in the past. All the typical stuff in terms of data or traffic acquisition. Again, let's just experiment with this bang out to the last 90 days. So you can see here, there's some interesting traffic sources. We can see how much direct traffic is coming in, how much traffic is coming through organic search. So on a Google search, for example, how much stuff is coming through an organic social post. So that could be Facebook, could be Instagram. There's a lot more detail behind this again in a minute that we've never seen before. So I'll show you that. But at this stage, we're just kind of seeing some of the stuff that we're probably familiar with. Some of this is referral traffic. So other websites that have had a link on them to this particular site. And then occasionally you'll get unassigned traffic. We don't really know where that's come from. And normally that's just kind of the wrap up to give us our overall total. But here's a new one. This is something we haven't seen before in terms of traffic, organic video. So this over the last sort of 90 days, again, this is a test site, so don't expect this to be big numbers in here, but there's already been a visit from an organic video. So that's very likely to be YouTube or Vimeo. And we've not before been able to track that kind of traffic. So Google here is giving us traffic sources. This is people who have come to our website from an organic video click-through. So that's something we've never seen before. So could be interesting. If you've got video as part of your content strategy, there could be some interesting data that's going to appear there. There's some really early sort of indications. If you've got a very active website, this particular one is a test site, so it's not going to show this. But already we're starting to see these words, insights and recommendations. So very differently to what we've had before, where it was all about you having to figure out what all this data meant. GA4 is going to give us some recommendations. So it's going to look in there. It's going to look for trends. It's going to look through its learning algorithms. It's going to look for patterns that might be of interest, and it's going to present them here. Now, of course, this is all very new stuff. This is really out of the box stuff. But the second thing I want to show you, and you'll see this little button here, insights, appear on lots of these pages. We're going to see it again in a minute when we start to explore over here the reports and the explore section. Remember, we're still here in the home dashboard, but already we're seeing insights. So if we click on that, what you can do, there might not already be enough data in here for us to get much out of this, but if you happen to be curious, you can ask analytics intelligence questions. In other words, you could, if you wanted to, if you look at that drop-down menu here, you could click on here. How many users did I have last week? What are my top pages and screens by views? On what days did I get the most users? Well, that for a lot of us is going to be very interesting. So if I click on that, it then tells me actually on this particular test site, Wednesday was the most popular day of the week, Tuesday next, Thursday, Monday, Saturday, Friday, and Sunday the least. So it's starting to give you insights. Now, of course, this is very basic stuff. We can interrogate this data in a minute, and I'll show you where. But at least it's starting to get us thinking of, what would I want to know? You know, this is going to be probably quite important. If you were looking to do a website launch, for example, well, you definitely wouldn't launch here on Friday or a Sunday. You'd probably launch on a Wednesday, because that at the moment is the top day of the week by users. And okay, this is only based around a week's data on a test site. But you can imagine if you could interrogate that data and find out, well, why is it Wednesday? And where do people go on a Wednesday within the site? Because, of course, those would be events that are happening on a Wednesday within the site. Then you can start to really interrogate to a forensic level to really understand the why. And that's really only just really starting out. to give us, some initial kind of ideas. And then if we want to share it, we can produce a nice little report. Got some better reports to show you in a minute, but we can start to then really understand the value and the power of this stuff. So Insights is a very interesting little button that's going to allow us to really understand. I'll click on, yes, that was positive. That was interesting. A related result, maybe top date by users. Maybe there was a particular day, and here it is, on this particular Friday. Again, it's a test site, so it's not really meaningful data, but we can see that on Friday the 7th, there were some 11 visitors to these particular pages, and very different to some of the other days, these days earlier in the week, for example, or this particular sort of Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That particular Friday was really, really significant. And then, of course, you can interrogate further, well, why is that the case? So the homepage is getting us started. It's getting us really starting to think about some of the things that might be relevant to us. And so that then introduces us to the concept of reports. So if I click on reports, what you will see then is this, and this is really interesting because this is very, very different to what we've seen before. Everything's still navigated through this left bar, but different things will appear. And some of these things will be things that as a marketer will feel very familiar to you. Now, obviously I've said about real-time. So the snapshot, by the way, is very much the home screen, similar kind of layout. So this is probably where you're going to go. You're probably not necessarily, once you delve into GA4, you're not going to probably use the home page very often. You're probably going to come straight into the report snapshot. And this will give you a snapshot of kind of where your traffic's coming from, kind of the original sources, countries, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of what we were just looking at there on the home page. But what I want to get into is this really more interesting stuff. I mean, real time is potentially interesting to you. I doubt whether there's any data in here. It's only a test site. Yeah. So there's nothing appearing in there for the last 30 minutes, but it will tell you a lot. When something appears here, it'll tell you a lot. And you can then start to interrogate that and potentially start to edit comparisons with other periods of time. So if you want to know in real time what is happening now versus maybe pre-launch of a particular new product page that you've added, new section to the website, maybe you're running a live webinar or something on your website, so you can do some comparisons between the live real-time reporting of what's going on right here, right now, in the moment, versus maybe the same time yesterday, for example. But I'm personally not hugely interested in the real-time stuff. Yeah, you get curious about it if you've got lots of time, but for most of us as marketers, this is the game changer. And now Google is calling it life cycle. I'm calling this customer journey because remember your customer journey: awareness, conversion, retention, acquisition, monetization, retention. Can you see what's happening in here? This is Google's version of our customer journey. And there's lots of really interesting stuff in here. So on the acquisition drop-down, you can get an overview. You can see the traffic acquisition. You can see the user acquisition. In the engagement, we're going to come on to engagement in a minute because it includes lots of the really relevant stuff. The events, we'll look at in deep level of detail in a minute at events, but it also talks about conversions. It talks about the pages and screens that could be of interest, the landing pages that people have been engaging with. And then it talks about monetization. It talks about if you do any form of conversion, so it could be an e-commerce purchase, or it could be you decide a specific point in the journey that is your conversion point. You can then monitor how that happens as a series of events within your website. And also then, really interestingly, the retention piece. So you can start to do deeper interrogation over the number of new visitors to your site versus returning visitors. This is reporting, well, it should be reporting last 12 months. It's not actually reporting anything right now, but it will do, obviously, when the data starts to really get, oh, here it comes, it took a bit of time. When the data starts to get reported in here, you'll be able to do comparisons between the events or the things that happened between people who are new to the site, where they went, what they did, And really forensically, it's how many people scrolled down a particular page and then eventually clicked or not, and compare that to your returning visitors. So people are already familiar with your brand and your products and your services. What kind of events did they do and experience on those same pages? So we're going to get really, really clever about how we start to use this data. And it's all about starting with the questions. So when you think about those events that are happening in your desired customer journey, you can then start to build a view based around the journey within your GA4 reporting. Now, again, you'll see over here, we've got the little insights button. I don't know whether there is anything in here that is going to be able to be reported. I think it's probably because we're just focusing currently on that one, but let's look at retention here. Let's see whether we can get anything different sort of coming through. I don't want to share that. I want that one to disappear. Not sure how we're doing that, but let's go to suggested questions and see whether we can find something a little bit different in here. So it might well be, so let's do a traffic analysis. The month-over-month growth in users, for example, over here. So it's saying, well, is 21% growth if we're looking here between this period of time, which is June versus July. We've seen a 21% growth on this particular site. And then we can then do a detailed sort of breakdown. If we then go in and then compare that between new and returning visitors, okay, it looks like we've got more visitors coming back, but are these visitors new ones or are they existing ones? It's the kinds of questions that we can start to think about. So can you see what's happening? Even though we haven't actually even started to explore, we're just getting some snapshots and we're just seeing some reports. We haven't gone on to the explore bit yet. What the section here, the reports bit, is doing is it's starting to tease out from our thinking some of the questions or some of the things that might be of interest to us. Okay, so it's all about trying to give us a sort of a feeling as to, well, okay, what kind of things would I want to know? Now, not just kind of what is it telling me, but, you know, based on what it's telling me, where would I want to take things next? And that's really, really key here. And then when it comes down to this little bit down here, so that's the life cycle. So that's our customer journey bit. Then we've also got a bit of a deeper dive into what they're calling user attributes. So we can look at the demographics. We can look at an overarching kind of overview as to, you know, where the people are coming from. We can break it right down to a particular city level. Then we can view the specific cities and then find out, you know, does somebody from London behave differently to somebody from Bristol? And does somebody from Bristol who is a new visitor behave differently to somebody who's from London who is already a returning visitor, etc., etc. So you can start to, again, particularly if you're doing segmented campaigns, you can start to get a real sense of the difference of what's going on. Now, we've had this kind of scratching the surface of this in the previous version of Google Analytics, but you can see that this is coming at us at a very, very high level here in the base reporting, even before we start to figure out, okay, what is actually properly going on? Now, another thing I want you to start thinking about, we've already started to introduce the word events in here, and that's a really, really key one. But the second word I want you to really think about, and of course, for most of us, particularly those of us responsible for things like social media and digital campaigns, etc., is we are all about, and most of us really are obsessing about, engagement, because it's all very well getting noticed. It's all very well getting that hook so people pay attention, but then we've got to convert that attention into engagement. And that is what Google now understands we need to really, really get from our Google Analytics reporting. So what does it do at this again? So we're still quite high level here. It's starting to then say, well, okay, in this period of time, So we're looking over some of this test data. Over the last 12 months, there have been 306 people who have visited these particular pages. 306 of those are new. So you can see, these are brand new pages. And interestingly, out of those visitors, we have seen 389 engaged sessions. In other words, the number of sessions that lasted longer than 10 seconds or had a conversion event or had 2 or more screen or paged views. Okay, so this is interesting. So this is now something that Google is saying, okay, this is important stuff, because we're not looking here in any way, shape or form at vanity metrics, because, in the past, you could kind of get away with bluffing the fact that you had a successful website by, oh yeah, we had 1,000 visitors and we've got loads of people coming on looking at these pages. Well, we had bounce rate, which were the number of visits that actually resulted in no click-throughs to another page. But that was kind of all we had. We didn't really have a true measure of engagement. You could look at the amount of time spent, but even that didn't really tell you, did they do anything, or did they just, stay on that page and then go off and do something else, maybe check emails, go make a cup of coffee? You never knew. Whereas engaged sessions, and of course the spin-off from that is the engagement rate per whatever segment you put in, or the demographic, in this case it's geographic location. This gives us a much more of a sense of how engaging the page is, not just that they spend time on it, but that they're actually doing something with that time that they're spending. So for me, this is a game changer. The fact we've got events that we can plan ahead, and we can then basically look at how engaged people were when they visited specific people, not just general people. My target audience isn't currently targeting Australia, for example, or the Philippines. So I'm not really focused on those, but I am focused on the UK and I am focused on the US here. So, you can see here that, a good proportion, 50 to 60% of the pages that these people are visiting have an engagement rate associated with them. And so I would think, well, as a good foundation, we can probably, even though it's only low numbers of visitors, we can probably build from that. So it kind of gives you a sense that, there is a trend pattern here. There's something you can actually work with as a marketer. So rather than just the time spent, or the dwell time, as we always called it, the time spent in the session, we can see that people are actually engaging. So to me, that's really interesting. And it can also be interesting if you are maybe looking to offer particular services out through various different tech. So you can actually then start to, if there's enough data in here, yes, there is, which is good. So the data in here is reporting the balance between desktop and mobile and tablet, for example. So if you're looking to optimize your pages, a lot of people say, oh, it's always mobile first. Well, in this particular instance, I'd argue, no, it isn't. I think this is desktop first, followed by mobile on this particular site and these particular pages. And you can look and see here the kind of operating system. So you can see here it's predominantly Windows. It's predominantly Windows desktop. It's then followed probably by desktop Mac, followed then probably by Windows Mobile. So you could be looking there to sort of optimize maybe for Android as well. So you're looking there to maybe advise and guide your developers or your coders or your agency to the kind of the preferences that you have for the audience that you need to serve. And so you can start then to develop stuff and design stuff that actually is meaningful to the audience. So rather than just taking lock, stock and barrel what the wider digital marketing industry says you should do, and actually base it on things that are relevant to your specific needs and website. So to me, that's interesting. That gets really, really good in terms of being able to kind of guide and design things. And look, even down to the level of individual browser that is being used to access the site. And you can then see based on the engagement time. And look, here's a really, really interesting thing that's actually going on here. If you're looking for engagement, even though the numbers aren't as high, Microsoft Edge as a browser has the highest engagement rate alongside Firefox. Firefox, less so than Chrome, even though you would argue that Chrome, obviously being the most number of users of this particular browser on this website, you would automatically, if you looked at that on a surface level, you'd be thinking, well, we've got a design for Chrome. But of course, here, if you want an engaged audience, well, here down a smaller number, but actually the engagement rate is significantly higher. So you can't forget those guys too. So do you see what's happening here? You've got, a deep opportunity to go forensic with it. And we're going to go that in a minute when I show you how to produce some reports. But also then we're looking at this concept of events and how those events play out in terms of engagement level. So begin your kind of interrogation here, thinking, well, what events are relevant to me? So I mentioned that before, but now you can say within those events, what kind of engagement level would be acceptable? What's my kind of target engagement level? And of course, you can see up here, remember that little insights button again, you could then click on the Insights button, and it will then start to give you, based on these particular pages, you can then start to get some suggested questions. And of course, the more you use it, the more it learns about what you like, the more it will then present you with information that's related to what it is you're looking to achieve. So as with a lot of these AIs, they are learning alongside you. So get in here, play with it, start to use these particular pages and these features. So far, we've looked at home and we've looked at reports, but the place that I really want to get you to is explore, because this is the game changer. Okay, so explorations are ways of exploring the data and the metrics in here to get some really interesting insights. Okay, so I've clicked here on Explore, and you can then create your own new exploration, or you can go for one of a number of templates. Now, the free form is the one I'm going to focus on here, but you can go and have a little play with funnels, with paths, and if you've used visitor flow or user flow in the old version of Google Analytics, does this one look familiar? It is very familiar. It's the next iteration of that, and there are others as well. You can look to see if you can get some overlaps, particular target segments, etc., etc. So there's a lot of stuff here to play with, and these will give you different styles and forms of reporting that you can then obviously export into your dashboard or produce as a monthly report. So there's some great stuff in here, but what I want to do is I want to take you to a free form explore page, because this is what I want to show you, and you can come in here and have a little play, but I want to tell you how to actually create and build these forms up, okay? And it's all left to right. So don't worry about how complicated this looks right now. Do this a couple of times and you'll become very familiar with where all these things sit. And as I say, in the description below of the recording of this, I'm going to share with you some links out to some really good tutorials that will explain this step by step. But I just want to give you a flavor of the things that you can basically use to start building it. And we'll build a little simple one here together right now. So we have variables, and then we have tab settings. So tab settings is how do you want the report to look? Okay, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But the variables one is what do you want in your report? And so you've got the name. So we're just going to call this, well, let's just go in and call this something like Neil's test. Or no, Neil's demo. Let's look at that. Neil's demo. Let's just call it Neil's demo. Okay, so that's great. So Neil's demo. We're going to put some dates in here. So we're going to do custom dates. So I click on that. Let's do the custom dates. Let's go backwards. I think we'll need something a little bit longer, kind of than that. So let's go back a little bit earlier. Let's go back to 18th. There to the 17th. So we've got that nice sort of period when we've actually had this. So that should do fine. Let me just bring this up a little bit so we can hopefully get that down to be able to run that. So that should be fine. Okay, so I'm not going to click on compare. Compare would then allow you to compare this data set with an earlier data set. I'm not going to do that, but if you click on it, you'll see you get the two sets of dates to compare. But let's just work on the one data set for this particular moment. So let's just take that in and just see that that's got caught in there. That should allow us to save. Why we're not saving? To be able to save, let me scroll down the page, and of course in good old demo form, there we go, I'll just extend that, there it is. So now we've got our data set. So it's capturing between June the 20th and July the 17th. So we've actually put in, so we've got the name, we've got the date. And now what we can do is start to think about segments. So if you think about segmentation in marketing, that is what we're doing here. So segments can be a geographic segment, for example. It could be the segment of where the traffic actually came from. Could be both. So you could have a geographic segment, or you could have mobile traffic. So maybe if you wanted US traffic from a mobile device, that would be your preference. But I'm going to actually look up here. So I clicked on the little plus. I'm going to take the, I'm not going to go for a segment there. So let's have a look in here. So I want to go to a segment at a new condition. I'm going to drop that down there. I'm going to look at demographics. No, I'm not. I'm going to look at geography, and I'm going to look at country. And the country is, and then I'm going to need to add a filter. So the country needs to be something. So then I'm going to put United Kingdom, and I'm going to apply. So what I've done here is I've created a segment. And you can see already it's telling me, yep, there's data in that segment over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm saying it's a country that contains the United Kingdom, and that's fine. That's all I want. So I only want that traffic. So I'm going to save and apply. And what it's going to do is it's going to add it in there. Now, I didn't actually add the name there. I should have actually before I jumped out there, but you can see there it's the country matches the United Kingdom. And what I've done there automatically by adding it from here is it's dragged it across here. If I wanted to take that back, I can literally just click and drag it back, and you can see here it is over here. But I'm going to basically just leave that one in there. So that's stayed in there as a copy. So the country matches United Kingdom, and I only want direct traffic. So I will drag that across to create a further detail to that segment. So my segmentation, and you can see it's trying to load the traffic. Hopefully there will be a little bit of traffic in there. There is, that's great. So my segmentation here, and this is the tab, remember, this is the chart that we're creating from the segment here, and I'm clicking and dragging it across. So I can drop or select a segment here. I can drop it, bring it across in here. So we've already got here, this is United Kingdom traffic, and it's direct traffic. So that's only people who've come directly to the website. So you can decide on your segment. So that's always going to be a useful starting point. But then you could say, well, okay, that's all very well, but what I want to do is I don't just want direct traffic in the UK. I've been doing a specific campaign. So what I want to do is I want to have a specific city, and I want that specific city to be the row. So I want to actually break it down by cities. Now you can see this is already in here as a dummy version, but I could take that and click that and drop that back across if I don't want it in here. But you can see it's already set up to give me the various cities in here as this particular row. Now, I'm not sure whether or not, well, actually, let me just see what we're going to get. So if I go back over to the dimension over here, I just particularly want the city ID. So let me see, that should give me, if I import that in, there's city ID has appeared here. Now I'm interested in the city. So I'm going to drag city across here. And then I'm going to take that one back. Oh, if that'll let me go. No, it won't. So if you had, for example, a report that you were collating, and it was actually drawing from not a name of a city, for example, but you needed to be able to create your report, the ID number of the specific city, you can see that you can actually have both attributes in here. And I've done that by having city and city ID. So that's adding that particular feature into each of the rows. Now, if I don't want that, I can literally just take that across and drop that back over into there. Or I can just literally click, no, I don't want it. So here we are, we're building this up as we go. And now what I might want over here is to actually see not just the number of active users, which again is the one that's actually down here in a value. So you can see the values, because what also Google is asking you to do is, having created your segment, so you've put the segment into the columns, you've actually decided on your dimensions, so you've trimmed down and put a boundary around that segment to make it a bit more specific. Then it wants to know, well, okay, what do you want to know about what's going on? So what metrics do you want to actually put in there? So it's by default included active users. So the number of active people who are coming across in London through direct traffic onto desktop, onto the site. Now, I might think, well, I'm not really that bothered by that, but I might also think, okay, I'm going to take that out. And of course, that'll mean that there's no data available to report on, but I want to see what other data. So if I click on the plus, what other data is available? Now, let me just show you all of the data options you've got. So you've got advertising metrics, you've got event metrics, you've got pages and screens. So you could look at what particular pages they might go to. If you're running e-commerce on here, you might want to go specifically to where pages have given you some revenue, etc. And again, this is where the user or the visitor actually came from here. But I'm going to be focusing here on event, because I want to know what actually happened within here. So I'm going to go for event count. So I want to know how many events actually happened on this particular page. So I'm going to import that. So I've now got event count over here, which I'm going to drag across as a value into my metrics. And you should see here now, there's my events. So that's what we were seeing before. But I also in here want to find engagement. So not only do I want events, but I want to see how much engagement we've got. So I can use this little feature up here to find and see if I can find engagement. So I click on that. I can now see in user, there's user engagement and there's average engagement time per session. Now, I would like both of those things, and I'd also like engagement rate. Now, this is going to obviously increase the amount, so I've imported that. That's going to increase the amount of options I've got, but let's kind of put these into a report that hopefully then will mean something to us. So I'm actually getting a little bit bored now of having looked at this, the actual device category. So I'm going to actually remove now the device category from here, and just hopefully it will tell us, yeah, there we go. So we're looking to see the amount of direct traffic that we've got via each of these cities in here. It's interesting, Bilbao's, which I know is not in the UK, but anyway, we'll worry about that and we can probably filter that one out. But what I want here, we can see there's event count coming in, but I also want average engagement. I also want to have user engagement, and I'm going to drop that in between. And so there comes in between, and then I want engagement rate as well. So I've got now 3 different criteria. And so now what I can see is that the amount, and let's come across here so I can sort of come across, if I want to see the total amount, if I just squeeze this in a little bit, then it should hopefully just allow us to see it without you getting a bit confused by everything that you're seeing here. Hopefully I can just show you what we've got in here. So what I've built up here, and you can see over on the left-hand side are metrics. And it literally was as simple as clicking and dragging across. Our metrics are the number of events by city through this particular time frame, the amount of visitor engagement on those particular events within that city or those cities, and then the engagement rate. So looking at this, what would this tell me? If I was interested to know which cities, and of course I can shuffle this in terms of, because obviously it's not in event count order, but I could do that literally just by clicking event count order, and then it will give me in the event order. And of course it's gone in the opposite thing. How am I going to do that? Probably re-clicking. No, it's going to ask me to do it in a different order here. So let's go click that. Here we go. That's better. So what I've got is I'm going to get back to totals. Hold on. Excuse me for this one. As you can see, trying to do this as a demo is a little bit tricky when you're trying to show people and not confuse them. So now what I've done is I've managed to reorder literally just by clicking that. Okay, I had to shuffle it twice because it was giving me the lowest first, and I clicked it again to get the highest first. So what I've now got is based on cities in the UK. You can see Bilbao has now dropped out, fortunately. No offense to anybody in Bilbao. But what we have here is my league table for UK cities based on the number of events through this time scale and the amount of engagement time, and then also the engagement rate. So what I'm seeing here is that there's a relatively good engagement rate based on a huge number of events that have happened for visitors, direct visitors from London, which if I was doing a campaign, I'd be very, very happy with. But if it was only a London campaign, I'd also be then looking to see, well, okay, where is another city that's got a very good engagement rate? Well, look down there, Swansea, for example, and Cardiff. So even though the numbers of events have been much lower, which probably implies if I was to bring in the number of active visitors here as well, because that would be the next thing I might be interested to find out. So let's bring in the number of active visitors into our metrics. I'm going to need to shuffle that around. So I'm going to move that up to the very first thing, because then what I can do is if I bring that out slightly, I can see that, of course, this is based on a very small number, but it might give me a view that says, okay, this is really interesting to spot the next place that I would want to go and do a targeted geographic launch of a particular product or service. So I can see that whilst there was only one potential user, because these are very, very small numbers that we're looking at here, but their engagement was 100%. So they were engaged for 13 minutes and they did 206 events, as did the person who came in from Cardiff. They were on for 94 events. So it allows you to then really, really get a sense by literally using the metrics in here and bringing them across, dragging and dropping based on your dimensions. In other words, the physical boundary that you want to work with and the segment that you're looking to analyze here. It allows you then to have a really interesting little play with the data and see what kind of visualizations you can find. Now, this particular visualization is in table form. Now, these, because of what we've done here, probably won't look particularly good, but you can go for donut chart, for example. Well, actually, it doesn't look too bad. But of course, play around with the data, play around with the metrics and the dimensions, and you can then find different styles of reporting. The line chart may or may not look any good. It's a little bit confusing. Scatter plots are also very interesting. You can find that if it's an event count by the number of active events that you had, you can see any particular locations that kind of stand out significantly, obviously here. So if you're looking to do different types of visualization, that can also be very, very interesting. And of course, if you're looking to put this into a dashboard, maybe something like a bar chart here could also be helpful. And you can also then produce a geographic map. Obviously, you can be then zooming in quite wide on a geographic. Kenya and Bilbao in Spain appeared on here. I have no idea whatsoever, but it will obviously give you an opportunity to go and have a little bit more of a look if you're doing it on a different set of dimensions. So have a play. This is really, really fun to play with. And as a marketer, as I say, beginning with the events that you're interested in, thinking about the customer journey, and then using some of those earlier reports is interesting. But the quicker you can get in and play with the explore feature, decide what your segment is, give yourself create a particular explore or exploration, decide on the custom of the dates that you want to do. You can go for last 30 days. You can go for pretty much any time frame customized that you like. There's a whole range of different ways of playing with the data, and then see what happens. Segment it down. The data is of limited, as we saw at the start of this, of limited value if you only play with the high level data. So start to click and drag across lots of the things that really make sense here. You can get very, very specific. For example, mobile data, so mobile traffic rather, based on data that was only coming from the UK. If I take that out and just work with mobile data, we get a whole different set of reports, etc. So you'll see in real time what's happening and what goes on. And then remember your dimensions to really hone it in, really start to get sort of very, very specific sort of for it. And I could maybe take out city, and I could go, if I was looking to go international, I could actually then do this by row. So drop country in there, and then I can start to get a real sense that, for this particular site, if I was only focusing on UK, well, there's a US audience there to play with too. And what are you interested in? Well, as we saw, there's going to be a lot of different kind of metrics, and the metrics change. The metrics will kind of drop in and drop out as you change the above. So it could be then that I need to know the number of active users, which we've already got, the number of events that actually happen, and maybe do a comparison between, mobile events and the desktop events, as we saw earlier. That could be also an interesting comparison to let you really fine tune your decision making that you find as you work through this. So that is a brief introduction as to how you as a marketer can get some really good, hopefully, insights into the various kind of new opportunities that GA4 is throwing up for you. So remember, it's all about events. Remember, it's all about segmentation. It's all about putting dimensions around those segments. So really thinking of your target audience as being a subset of everybody you could talk to, and then you can do that little drag and drop across. GA4 is very different. It is about you personalizing the data. The data there sits intelligently behind the screen. And so you have to get in and start playing with it. You have to get the value from personalizing it and doing it your way. So it's very hard for me to sit here and give you the ultimate answer here. You've got to get in and actually play with it. But those are the things to think about: segments, dimensions, and then metrics. And those are the three building blocks to get some of these real insights into the events that you're going to be playing with as you go forward. And as we saw, you can click on the little insights button top right to get some real guidance on some other things that you might want to be working with and reporting. So those are the elements I would suggest working with. You can obviously find out a lot more by following on the tutorials that I'm going to put in at the end. And I'm also going to put into the description a whole host of definitions as well, just so that you can keep up to speed with the way that Google is putting very specific definitions behind some of these terms. So when I've said segments, that's pretty clear. But when I say dimensions, what does that really mean? So I'll make sure that you've got all of the hopefully very helpful definitions for each of these terms, so you can use that as a reference material when you go into the exploration section of GA4. So the very best of luck with this. Obviously drop me a direct message or shout out on socials if you need any further guidance or signposting to any of these features. But as I say, a lot of the tutorials that I'll copy into the description will give you hopefully everything that you need. But if it's marketing specific guidance to how would I create this or that, or where would you find this, yeah, give me a shout, and very, very good luck. I think we're just still scratching the surface of what's going to be possible with GA4, but it is now the time to get familiar with it. It's a very exciting place to play, and I wish you every success. And hopefully we'll be talking about some really exciting innovations that have come out of some of the insights that you've found. So very best of luck. Wish you every success and happy playing in GA4.